Thank you so much for coming to check out another episode of the StashCast. The StashCast is brought to you by Needle. What if you could use data and analytics to predict real estate transactions before they occur? You can with Needle. Check it out at Needle, NEDL.us to learn more. All right, today I have a very special guest. StashCast is about interesting conversations with interesting people focused on commercial real estate and prop tech, and we have Connor Cleaves with us today. Connor, how are you?
Hey Stash, doing well. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Thrilled to have you here. So you and your partner have an interesting company that you're working on, but why don't you give the folks at home an idea of who you are and what you do, and then we can get into that.
For sure. Connor Cleaves, co-founder and CEO of Nector. I was born in Northern Kentucky, went to school at Xavier, go Muskies. And while I was there, I started working for a company called Cushman Wakefield, locally in Cincinnati. I met my co-founder, Steve, when I was working at Cushman. I was doing acquisitions and dispositions for different funds and investors and tenants, and realized in the process that the financing process for commercial real estate can be super clunky and challenging. There's a lot of hands involved in kind of latent processes. So we put our heads together and came up with Nectar, right? So Nectar, we're a platform that commercial real estate investors use to go and get a loan and then manage their debt. We use an AI copilot and some back-end data integrations that investors can utilize to really create some efficiencies in that financing process. My co-founder, Steve Young, his background is in commercial lending. This is where he cut his teeth. And then we have John back as well. He's grown various technical teams through different growth stages at companies like P&G, Indeed, and other startups.
That's awesome. That's super exciting. Yeah, I think I share something in common in that we both recognized a need in the generally kind of antiquated world of commercial real estate and financing on your half. So you were working at Cushman, a small firm, maybe you've heard of it. And how did you decide, where did the genesis of the idea come from? Help me understand that, because I'm curious about, I always love hearing those stories of how you came up and how you got to where you're at.
For sure. I interned there for a while, and then upon graduation, parlayed that into a full-time gig. I was on a couple stellar teams, the healthcare team over there, and then the industrial team. And part of my job, in addition to underwriting and negotiating these sales and leases, I had all of these tools in my tool belt, as right. And every once in a while, somebody would come to me, a client, and say, "Hey, do you know anybody that could perhaps provide some financing options for this?" Now, I knew mortgage brokers in the industry, I knew lenders in the industry, and one day I sent some underwriting over to my buddy, Steve, who was at US Bank at the time. And he calls me, he goes, "Listen, we got to grab some beers after work and talk about this deal that your client has." Great. So we meet up, and he said, "Hey, listen, this is my process internally. He said, I take this Excel file and I put it into a loan offering, and I show it to our committee, and we negotiate with the client." He goes, "Is there any way we could make this more efficient?" Right. And we started talking to other mortgage brokers and people we were working with. And we realized that these deals happen on a very they can happen on a very quantitative basis, right? So there's a very specific investment with these metrics. Perhaps it's a $10 million industrial building with a high credit and an 80% LTV. Great. There are lenders out there who fit that precise profile, right? Lenders have a very specific risk appetite.
Right.
So what we did was build out an Excel model, not to get too grainy, but a bunch of conditional ifs that fed into a VLOOKUP to match borrowers and lenders on a pass-fail basis on these very binary metrics that we felt. And we were passing that around the industry, Steve and I, and people said, "Hey, this is pretty cool. This could have some legs. If you could put a software around, this might be something we would pay for." So we spent a lot of time kind of ideating and refining what that would look like. Now, Steve and I were non-technical. So we went and through some mutual friends, found John, who is a stellar back-end developer, and he built this out for us. And it was a multi-year kind of ideation, but we really put legs on it in 2023.
Okay. Yeah, I think that may have been when we got, because I remember Steve was talking about it for a while, And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And then did we get together back in 2023 to talk about it then? Maybe.
You
I
know
don't know.
what? I know you've talked shop with Steve quite a bit, maybe in person, but I'm sure we did. We probably either grabbed a coffee or a beer one of those days. We've been meeting with a ton of people. That's what we love to do. So if anybody's out there listening, we love learning about investors and brokers and these lenders. We like learning about their processes
Mhm.
and what some of the pain points they're addressing and just getting into the minutia of those things. It's something that we enjoy. Please, if anybody wants to talk shop, please reach out.
Yeah, before we buried the lead too far, what's the best way to get in touch with you and where can they see the technology? Is it live right now or where are
The
you at in
the
that
the
stage?
text live. Yep. So you can first of all you can reach out to me at Connor Connor at nectarcapital.com. Nectar's with an O. We're a connector of a software. And yeah, we are live. So if people want to pilot and trial this thing, the more eyes, the better. We welcome feedback. Get in there and tear it apart for us. I'll tell you where we're at in the product phase. So we recently went through a program called Techstars. It's one of the kind of the big accelerators. We went through their New York program. We were very fortunate to get into that and had an incredible experience. We've taken the last three to 4 months to really refine and hone in on the product. So we've been very borrower focused, getting really good at packaging debt. And we have a pilot program that we're running right now, along with some design partners. We're going to roll out our paid version in Q2. Anybody that's listening that wants to get in there and tinker around a bit, please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's super exciting. So how does it work? I
Yep,
mean,
of
without
course.
giving away your secret sauce, what the goal of technology, I think, and bringing it into commercial real estate is to make transactions more efficient and make the experience better. How are you guys doing that with Nectar?
Yep. So the majority of your listeners obviously understand the process of a commercial real estate transaction, right? You have site selection and then underwriting, and the buyer and the seller are negotiating, and perhaps weeks, months, maybe longer in a terrible
Yeah.
scenario, you come to terms, right? It seems like all of the hard work's done, but the vast majority of the time, you're going to go get a loan for that opportunity.
Right.
In order to do that, you have to work with lenders or your mortgage broker to go find what terms work for everybody here in this lending scenario, this financing scenario. This is often the hardest part of the process, but it's here that we think exists the greatest unlock. So that process includes aggregating a bunch of information or data, about you, the property, and the market into what's called a debt package or a loan request. You send that out, you either work with your mortgage broker or you send it directly to the lenders you've been working with for years. The lenders are going to underwrite it because they're a bank and that's what they do. And they repackage it and send it back to you. And after a few weeks of refining this and distilling it down, you figure out what works for everybody. Sometimes this can go on a lot longer. We provide a software that, in a perfect world, compresses that process down from a few weeks down to a few minutes, right? That's our goal. We do that by automating a lot of and intelligently automating a lot of the workflow and administrative aspects of that financing process. That includes providing an AI co-pilot with some backend data integrations that allow you to quickly, efficiently, and more effectively package data or create that loan request. Now, you can take that and you can work with your existing lenders in a much more efficient ecosystem, or you can submit that to our network of lenders. And like I said earlier, this comes back to Genesis. It's very binary metrics that we can match you with lenders on. Now, lenders are looking for a pipeline of deals. Borrowers perhaps are looking to cast a wider net for more favorable terms. And so those are the things that we can provide in this ecosystem. Now, once that debt is secured, you're going to have obligations to manage that debt for years to come, which can often include covenant, LP reporting. Our goal is to automate that and be a full debt servicing platform. And we're using AI in order to intuitively predict and analyze your debt portfolio based on portfolio and market data in real time.
That's amazing. I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, I'm like, oh my God, this is so much. Like, I get it.
It's a lot. It
Yeah.
is. Yeah. It's a complex problem, right? And we're tackling it in pieces.
So is Nectar designed to be a replacement to the traditional commercial mortgage broker?
That was our goal at the outset, but no, we're not. What we've learned in this process, and we've learned a lot, but one of kind of the key insights that we've gathered is that commercial mortgage brokers, we can add just as much, if not more value to them than we do the direct borrower. So we were pleasantly surprised that we said, hey, we're going to get rid of the commercial mortgage brokers. They're too good looking and make too much money. And I know these guys, some of them reached out to us and we started working with a few that said, hey, we could use this to create our debt package and reduce friction throughout the entire ecosystem and use this almost as a CRM to see where our packages are, our loans are in status, and communicate with our borrowers and our clients and these lenders. And so our goal is not to disintermediate the mortgage broker. Our goal is to, again, reduce friction throughout the entire ecosystem for kind of all three parties involved. Now, we're borrower focused, that's for sure. But we feel tremendous value to both the mortgage broker and the lender as well.
Yeah, I think we share that commonality of perspective when it comes to the technology and what we're both working on. Both of our solutions seem to be geared at being a tool to be more efficient with your time. But yeah, I'm glad that the mortgage broker banker community, how you look at it, that they've positively received it.
Yeah, well, no doubt. And it's not everybody, but we've been lucky that we were, again, pleasantly surprised that we did get some really positive feedback and some traction even on that end. I think debt brokers or debt bankers, they add a lot of value in a lot of situations. And we see that. And those are the people we want to work with. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned you went through an incubator program. I'm sorry, what was it called again?
Techstars.
Techstars. I knew it was something stars. I was going to say rock stars.
Close. We'll take it.
You guys are rock stars.
Yeah, we'll take it.
I'm going through a similar thing with Needle through a program called GrowthX. Have Techstars helped you focus on who's your ideal, for me, it's ideal customer profile. Do you guys have a similar thing that you're working on?
Yep, we do. And so I don't know your experience specifically with that incubator, but personally, we really were thrilled to get into Techstars and enjoyed it. Now, there are all of these accelerators and incubators. There's a lot of them. Some offer more value than others, and we were lucky that we had an amazing kind of cohort management team and other really bright founders around us. We're first-time founders. It was super valuable from both a capital perspective, but also a lot of that grassroots guidance that we received over the last few months. That said, during the program, we were able to hone down and distill down onto our ICP, our ideal customer profile, right? Yep. Our ideal user is a middle market firm that deploys typically over $50 million in a year, over 20 investments, call it. We're very malleable. We add a lot of value on both tails of that bell curve of potential users. But where we've seen an inflection point for kind of customer acquisition costs and the value that they derive from Nectar, it's those middle market firms. For example, one of our design partners is going to deploy about $300 to $400 million perhaps this year, and over 40 to 50 investments. That's our bread and butter, where we not only have the capacity to provide value, but also our users derive a lot of value in that kind of sweet spot as well.
That's awesome. And so is it going to be on like a per deal basis how you derive revenue, or is it a SaaS model? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, for sure. So we're a platform SaaS model, right? Not to get too into the minutia of that, but it's a very transactionally based business. I was very transactional when I was in the business, and typically there's a lot of hands in the pod and a lot of people that are providing value in that system as well. But we feel that providing borrowers with the tools to empower them to go build out this capital markets, call it capability, on their own, best fit a SaaS platform. Certainly we could see a path to transactional revenue down the road, but we're just not quite there yet.
That makes sense. So it'll be like a monthly fee?
Correct. Yep. A monthly fee on a per seat basis. So say you have a 10 or 12 person investment team, you have a principal, head of debt, or a CFO, and then maybe an associate or an analyst. That's typically the makeup of our user base per team. Yeah.
That makes sense because those are all the people involved in the transaction intimately that are on that need to know basis.
Particularly on the financing side. Exactly. Yep.
hmm My world is predominantly multifamily. Are you specializing in one particular type of the commercial real estate vertical, or talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we're not quite specialists. We may fall into a niche here down the road. But right now, like I said, we're just trying to absorb as much as we can, derive as much information from the user base. And obviously, you have, call it the big four: office and industrial, retail, and multifamily. And multifamily, we're huge fans of multifamily right now, especially I'm in New York. We have a lot of these office conversions. Multifamily is a lot of fun. That said, data centers are huge in 2024. Hospitality, we have a really great design partner on the hospitality side. We're sub-asset class agnostic, if that makes sense, right? We're learning as much as we can about each of them and plugging forward. And like I said, we might fall into a niche down the road, but we're really excited to have such a platform that's malleable enough to work with these different types of properties.
Yeah, that's fascinating, man. It's you have a whole like blue ocean of opportunities in front of you.
And I do worry that we're trying to bite off more than we can chew at times, but that's part of the process. And the more people we can talk to in the industry, the more usage data we can get and analyze, the more pointed our roadmap will be. Looking forward to refining that as we grow.
Yeah. So we've talked about the use cases from the front end on for borrowers and we'll call them debt placement professionals.
Sure.
Um, what's the draw for the lenders? How do you attract banks or credit unions or insurance companies or so on and so forth? What's your pitch to them, maybe?
Of course, yeah. Right now we're in an environment that can be a little bit constrained. Purse strings can be tight, particularly on the lending side and in very specific markets more than others and specific asset classes more than others, et cetera. We're providing lenders we're not unlike the borrower, we're giving them the ability to cast a much wider net. And we're providing them with a pipeline of deals that is teed up to their precise risk profile that they don't have to go bird dog, right? They don't have to cold call for.
Yeah.
And our goal is to get them 95% of the way there. We understand there's going to be some human interaction. It's natural, especially in this industry. It's what makes the industry so beautiful. It's a relationship-based industry, and we don't want to totally disrupt that. We just want to make your relationship as a lender with your borrower much more efficient. These lenders also like to see debt packages through different lenses. Cheryl at B of A in Kansas City has one view of debt packages and in her underwriting criteria. And John at the boutique firm down in Columbia, Tusculum has a different view. But the way we spit out this information to the lenders, we want to be in the most efficient view for them as possible so that, again, we can reduce friction throughout the process. So the short of it is a pipeline of deals teed up to their exact risk profile and get them 95% of the way there without them having to go be business development reps and giving them their time back. We want to give them a lot of their time back in the process.
Yeah, that's a common theme amongst us, right? It's
No doubt.
Because really time it's so precious and it's the only resources that you can't get back. So
You're absolutely right. And you this better than anyone, Stash. If you can, like I said, our goal is to compress that process from a few weeks down to a few minutes and do it intuitively and efficiently. If we can do that, how much more time would your clients have to go find their next deal or spend on the things that really push deals forward? Right? How much more efficient can the entire commercial real estate ecosystem be? There's a lot of really cool progressive things about commercial real estate. I love buildings. Living in New York, I'm like a kid in a candy shop, but at the same time, it's lagging other legacy industries due to a variety of factors. Now, we see a lot of key decision makers coming up that perhaps cut their teeth on technology, the stashes of the world, who are looking for ways to become more efficient, and we're hopefully providing them with that. We think the industry can be much more efficient, as you do, obviously. And companies like Needle and Nectar and the firms that employ these softwares are I think, going to be a leg up in the next upcycle.
yeah, for sure. I think that you're interestingly and uniquely positioned for when that market does start to when the commercial real estate market as a whole does start to transition, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on like work market timing right now? And then what happens if this hits? Like, assuming it will, like, how do you scale it appropriately?
Yeah, so it's an exciting concern that we have, right? Like I said, we're very focused on the borrower right now. We're trying to get really good at packaging debt. And so that when we do place these loans, it's much more intuitive and it's much more effective, I should say. Now, if you look at the market as a whole, I think Deloitte put out a 2024 outlook, and four of their top five trends in the industry for 2024 had to do with cost and technology in one way or the other. So I think one was expense mitigation was big because there's a lot of uncertainty in the market right now, of course. Another was outsourcing technology to be more efficient, perhaps related to expense, driving efficiency. And I think one of the shining or glaring weaknesses of the market is cost of capital and capital availability. All of that said, we're talking to the market. We're out there, like I said, talking to as many people as we can, trying to learn about what they're doing, where they're going with their capital. What we've learned is that there's a lot of dry powder on the sidelines right now. A lot of people have been, and a little bit more conservatively, I would say, sans a major macroeconomic event or unexpected twist of rates here in the next 9 to 12 months. I'm certainly not an economist, but we're looking at a big capital influx here in Q4 and then hopefully Q1 of 2025. A
Yeah.
lot of the firms we're talking to, and I would like to hear your thoughts on this as well, but a lot of the firms we're talking to are saying, hey, we're just getting ready for the end of this year when things are a little bit more nimble. And lenders are saying the same thing. What's been your experience in multifamily?
Yeah. So last year we saw a spread between buyer and sellers of on average about 20%.
Okay.
So what that meant was the seller would say, "Oh, we want 60 million for this," and we're barely getting to 50. And that we played that same record over and over. And we kept putting our honest effort forward, looking at deals, measuring them against the current debt market. And that was the spread. That was the difference. At one point, we were up as high as 6.25 on some of our underwritings for agency debt.
Okay.
And I remember one guy, it's a 4.65 cap and it didn't have assumable debt on it. And I was like, my guy, what world are you living in? That was in the past. We just signed up 4 deals today. Or I'm sorry, this week, but we got 3 of them signed today. And we put a couple of land sites under contract. So it's the freeze that set in probably midsummer, you could say, on through the end of the year, I think is starting to thaw. I think that capital, you might say, is realizing that what I've learned, everybody lives on fees, right?
Mhm.
Brokers, lenders, acquisitions people, everybody actively doing deals, that's their primary income. So we've got to find a way to get back to normal. And so it's like, all right, we've got to maybe adjust that pro forma and let's take a double on a sale instead of hitting a home run, which for so long, for 5 years, maybe you're just hitting it out of the park. And I think it's better to, I don't see a whole lot of distress. I don't know if you're seeing that through your platform yet, but it's more, okay, let's just cut bait and move on to something else.
I hear you totally, and I think you're absolutely right. That's we're seeing a lot of the same things. And I am interested though. We mentioned there's core sub asset classes, and industrial has been on a tear for forever. But multifamily, I'm really interested in. And mainly from an outsider's perspective on multifamily, it's not something I've specialized in the past, but seeing this office market, people are saying like offices are the new malls. What we've seen is that something like 80% of office buildings in the US right now are in need of major improvement or just total redevelopment. And trying to figure out what they're going to do with all of these empty office buildings, because there's a widening gap between high and low quality workplaces. A lot of it might be, some of it might be due to WeWork and the peak of 2019 and everything that was going on. And COVID obviously was a big part of the degradation of that trend. But what we're seeing is that there's really only a few ways for empty office buildings to move forward. That's a huge capital injection to upgrade it to A space, in particularly in New York, but or tear down and redevelopment, super expensive. Or all of these are pretty expensive options, but converting to multifamily, right, is we're in the US, we're like 4 million homes short right now. I think 3.4 million homes short. It's a trend that's only getting exacerbated by a growing population, of course. I think personally, and I'm optimistic that we'll see a lot of these positioned office buildings converted into multifamily. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think I'm going to have an episode coming up soon that will talk about that in depth. But so big sigh because there is the possibility to do it, but there are some challenges with it as well. You've got some of these old buildings here in Cincinnati. You have the Carew Tower. One of the challenges is that you just have it wasn't built for a conversion ever in mind. It was built as a medical office building. You have all these columns in the way that are a little prohibitive. The other thing is new luxury development. 9-foot ceiling is the standard. And I think for some of these older buildings, they weren't built with deck heights to facilitate a 9-foot ceiling unless you're going to go probably true loft style where you have just exposed everything. But that's ugly aesthetically. You can hide it, but maybe you're painting your ceilings black. I don't know. I'm
Mhm.
sure somebody's going to figure it out. An interesting thing that I have seen in both new construction and not even historic, but just redevelopments of office buildings is a phenomenon where you walk in the front door and you've got a hallway that leads all the way to the window. And so you've got maybe your bathroom and your utility closet right by the door. And then you've got your bedroom tucked like behind the kitchen. This is on a one bedroom. And then you
Okay.
have your kitchen with your living space up against the window. And they cut like a hole above the kitchen to provide for natural light to get into the bedroom. And I've seen that both in converted office buildings. There's a couple of deals here in town, both in the CBD as, as well as in the suburbs that have that style. And I've also seen it in new construction opportunities
Yeah.
because it's like you only have so much window space that you can do. And in a traditional 3-story walk-up garden deal, you can design it with pods where you can have multiple windows in your building. If you have a window curtain that's one sheet of glass, what do you do with that? You put the bedroom behind, and maybe you have an internal window that just prevents some of the cooking from getting into your bedroom. But I think that's going to be it's not going to be that is the style that's going to predominate, come to popularity just out of
Yeah.
necessity.
Interesting. Yeah, it sounds like people are gonna, especially if there's a big, wave of office conversion to multifamily.
There's
Yeah,
gonna be. I saw
yeah,
something, whether you like them or not, the Biden administration just loosened up, I don't know, hundreds of millions of dollars for office conversions because they see a need.
cool.
And I think New York City, on their own, independently almost, is doing something similar.
It's a big trend in New York, and like you mentioned, I think people are, I guess, are gonna have to get really creative with these layouts in New York. Listen, I'm looking for an apartment here soon, and it's not easy. So a creative layout isn't the end of the world. I would take it, right? I think the standards perhaps might change, and it's listen, for all of the negativity around a lot of the commercial real estate aspects over the last couple of years, I'm really optimistic in the next 12 to 18 months, and certainly hopefully a big cycle beyond that, and we'll see how things shake out.
Yeah, I think though to maybe continue to think about and touch on what the conversion aspect, you might have a bit cozier of a unit, you might say, but it does lead to opportunities of, okay, we've got this one floor that looks at the back of a building, so it's not necessarily going to be the best for living space, but what if we make it into a sweet gym? Or you have, so I think my point is, I think that you can get creative with some of the amenity space. And if you have all this extra space, if work from home or work from your building is here to stay in some capacity, at least as a hybrid, maybe you have a smaller unit, but you do provide, as a redeveloper of office buildings, you have maybe cozier units, but you've got then opportunity to spend some of that space on working space. So people can actually get out of their apartment and go and be somewhere else and then come home and just rest and relax there and sleep there. Uh,
Yeah,
And the other, you made a comment that I don't disagree that office buildings are like the new malls.
Well,
And
people have been saying that. I don't
yeah,
necessarily agree, but yeah,
yeah. And so I think the point of that, though, the observation retail was dead 5 years ago. But I think that we've seen retail kind of reconcile with a lot of that extra space that they had, and they
no
figured it out.
doubt. Yeah, I
So
mean, you're absolutely right. Conditions were trending upward when retail through 2023. U.S. store openings, I think, in 2023 actually outpaced closings. And perhaps that's a factor of emerging from a sleepy COVID. But e-commerce is actually considered a tailwind for growth, probably for the industry as well. So I'm a bullish on retail. And you're absolutely right. It took a little bit to figure out, but that reconversion, firms that are using those malls or office buildings, that kind of sleepy asset, they're becoming a little bit more creative, and the ones that can stick around are going to be more efficient than they were before. I completely agree.
yeah, I think, and the same goes for office space.
Yes.
You're always going to have firms that are going to be, you're coming into the office no
I
matter
mean,
what.
Goldman and JP Morgan did that in New York just recently. I'm sure they're trailblazers in that capacity, but it's going to happen. Yeah.
Trailblazers for making people come into the office.
Well, as in kicking off a trend, because
Yeah.
I think a lot of firms will follow. That's for sure.
Yeah. No, exactly. So there's always going to be demand for office.
Yes.
And some people we're in an old, our office used to be a department store at one time.
Okay.
Uh,
Where are you, Stash?
we're downtown. Actually, we're in over the Rhine in the Hankey building.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I used to live over on Jackson in 12th right there, so I'm familiar.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
My first sale was 1209 Jackson Street.
Nice. I was in Hale Justice. It's a great block. Yeah.
Yep. Next door.
Cool.
Uh,
That's a good area. That's a good area. Yeah. So.
yeah. Well, this is great, man. I'm excited. I'm excited for you. I'm curious, before we maybe wrap, how has your experience been starting as a startup founder? I'm curious if you could talk about that journey, because I'm in the midst of it right now and it's chaotic. I'm just want to hear your experience, maybe.
It's crazy, right? As well as I do. It's chaotic, but in a really kind of productive way. It's productive chaos, whether it's refining your product, and we have all of these users that they want different features, and trying to figure out which ones to build and prioritize. And we kicked off a fundraise recently. So we're going through this process, and as a small, nimble team, we're all wearing different hats, and many of them. And especially I'm full time on this right now. It's taking up a crazy amount of my headspace during the day, but then at night as well, and 24/7. It's something that you can't really turn off. And I don't plan on doing that anytime soon, but it's fun, right? It's, if you're passionate about the problem you're solving, and I know you are, you can really dive in and enjoy the ride, the journey, and hopefully generate value and build something that people will use and enjoy, and it will make their lives easier, whether that's a commercial real estate software or whatever. It's tangible and it's fun. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's a challenge, but having a good time.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there is a roadmap or a playbook for startups, but at the same time, it's not like you just got to live it and then surround yourself with good people and hope that they're going to steer you right, as long as you're making good conscious decisions at the same time.
No doubt. And that's the goal, right?
Mm-hmm. This is great, man. Tell everybody again how they can get in touch with you.
Yep. Connor, CONNOR at nectarcapital.com. Nectar, CNECTOR. Find us on LinkedIn, Twitter. Yeah. Feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Connor, thank you so much for being a guest today, and I wish you the best of luck. Sincerely.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. We got to catch up, because I think Needle and Nectar hopefully are going to work together here in the future. So
we've got some
we'll
good
stay in touch.
crossover. Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely.
Thanks,
All right.
man. Have a good one. Appreciate it.
You too.